Alright, what do we have in the news this week? GTA6 delayed yet again. Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection releases in a messy state. Saints Row may be back on the menu. Alright. More damage done on the Nintendo vs. Palworld Lawsuit. All that and more on this week's Old Man Rage Said the News for the 10th of November 2025. Before we get into the news, if you like the content, hit the like and subscribe buttons and share the video. Kicking off this week with the Land of the Rising Sun and a proposal that can be a real game changer. Japan's government proposed a new non-interference in creative works policy for anime and game expansion in the West. Last month, Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry held its 8th Entertainment and Creative Industrial Policy Seminar, during which it proposed 5 key principles of its new policy guide for the Japanese content industry. The principles are as follows. 1. Large-scale, long-term strategic support. 2. Support efforts to spread Japan-made content to the world. 3. No interference in the content or creative works. 4. Provide direct support. 5. Prioritize those willing to take a challenge. Now, while some of them are vague, I do agree with the proposal, and as the article points out, the third one is very helpful because it means that payment processing companies will not be able to tell creators, hey, remove this. And that's a big deal in this day and age. The ministry also explained that their goal is to invest in IPs, human resources, and digital technology, as well as support international distribution networks and overseas investments into building fandoms. Moving on, the original writer for the Witcher series said that it's rare for CD Projekt Red to ask him about the Witcher lore. Andrzej Sapkowski wrote a prequel to his Witcher novels, and at an event, Games Radar asked the author if he'd been involved in any part of the development of Witcher 4, to which he replied with basically, nope. He further explained that CD Projekt Red did ask for advice and extra details while working on the previous games, while these days apparently it's so rare that CDPR contacts him to ask anything. He even further added, and I quote, "The contracts between me and the game people are excellent right now. Let's hope it stays that way." Referring to the lawsuit CDPR settled with him in 2019 over royalties. It ain't looking good for the game, considering that even the Rotten Tomatoes score for the season 4 of the show were abysmal. Bottom line, fans know what they want, and that's not what's being delivered. In other news, it's not looking good for the Mortal Kombat series because the Legacy Collection got slammed with negative reviews for embarrassing input delay and disappointing multiplayer. As of recording of this video, the game is still at mixed, and the gamers saw multiple complaints about input lag, to which anyone who plays any form of PvP games would know is the worst thing to have. Another issue people have is problematic audio issues across the board, with complaints that it's bugged in several of the games, with some people complaining about specific issues like Sub-Zero's ending in Mortal Kombat 2 being lower resolution than the rest. Add on top of that a €50 price tag and you get a recipe for disaster. What could have been an easy moneymaker turned out poorly. No two ways about that. And sure, even as of writing, they did release patch notes fixing problems with the game. That doesn't seem to have changed the general opinion. As of writing, the game has 268 players peak for the last 24 hours and still hasn't gone past the 1000 player all-time peak. But as they say, misery loves company, and the Legacy Connection has 2 companions alongside it. Another fumbled game is Football Manager 26, which is worse with its mostly negative reviews on Steam as of writing. People in general don't like the new UI, which is described as clunky alongside the classic performance problems and disappointing gameplay changes. Adding on top of that, the displeasure of veterans for the fact that core mechanics were simplified and you have a recipe for disaster. And disappointment. There is some good news for the people playing the game, at least if you bought it on Steam. There is a public beta update that is supposed to fix problems. Now, I don't know why they didn't add this as a regular day one update, but at least they're trying. And the final game on the list, Ghost of Yotei. Yay, we're back to this thing. Why? Well, because Grum's got a leak about the sales numbers. According to his leaker, the sales have flattened and sold around 650,000 copies less than Tsushima. That's roughly 16% less than the original. However, it did make more due to the high price point, making it profitable. However, it's still a disappointment for gamers, mainly because sequels on average sell more copies. Baldur's Gate 3 is a prime example of it. Grum's also speculated that Yotei will not have a second wave of sales months after the release due to word of mouth and the nature of the game. Whether that ends up being true, only time will tell. Moving on. The original Saints Row designer says the unloved 2022 reboot, quote, missed the mark. But the big news here is that Embracer wants him to pitch a revival idea for the franchise. Let me tell you this, that whole reboot is cooked from the start, and the only way to revive the series is to actually give fans what they want. No ifs, no buts. Just crude jokes that can offend people and batshit crazy gameplay. And yes, I didn't misread the title. The original designer does indeed want to revive the original series. Hell, the guy even believes he knows what makes the series work and added that it wasn't the recent reboot. Go figure. He also said in an Esports Insider interview to Embracer, if you're listening to this, contact me. Let's go. I can bring so much of the old band back together. Worked on Saints Row 1. I could turn that IP around with a decent budget. They don't even have to find it. I could get other outside people to fund it. I could turn the franchise around. I know I could. To which, on the Saints Row subreddit, he wrote that he was asked to create a pitch for a Saints Row reboot. Later told PC Gamers In that he contacted Embracer himself after the original interview and discovered there is interest. Sadly, he can't say more on the matter. Now, reading in between the lines, that says a lot, especially if he can't say more, since that means either NDAs are involved or the talks are not finalized, and both are generally a good thing. At least I hope. Moving on, EA promises that they will retain creative control, but we all know that the new owners will make them into a money generator, not a propaganda machine. In a new FAQ for the employees, the company promised that it was still, quote, in a strong financial position, even though they are in a $20 billion debt, and that it will have, quote, creative control over its project and the new era of private ownership. They also promised, and I quote, a thoughtful, steady approach to AI, which is a surefire way to shoot yourself in the foot with consumers, especially if you make heavy use of it. They also say that the Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund has been a stockholder in EA for years, to further say that they will maintain control. Ultimately, only time will tell if they're just talking nonsense or there's some truth to the matter. Personally, my money's on this statement is just damage control and the company heavily reduced the propaganda they spew out. But then again, that's just me thinking what's most likely gonna happen based on what they're saying. In other news, there are protests at Rockstar because of accusations of union busting. The Independent Workers' Union of Great Britain organized a demonstration after claiming that the firing of the 30 to 40 employees were aimed at halting unionization efforts. They also gathered to protest outside both offices on the 6th of November, holding banners and calling for the reinstatement of the affected workers. Take-Two and Rockstar denied those accusations, and a Rockstar spokesperson told Bloomberg that the employees were dismissed for, quote, leaking company secrets, saying, and I quote, "This was in no way related to people's right to join a union or engage in union activities." It's kinda suspicious how union workers got fired for alleged leaks, but anyway, Scottish Greens co-leader Ross Greer, yes, a political party backed up the people who got fired and called for the staff to be reinstated. Even some articles said that morale is at rock bottom. Now, where have I heard that one before? This statement came from an anonymous Rockstar employee on the GTA forums, who also collaborated the story that 34 employees were dismissed, even specifying that it was 31 in the UK and 3 in Canada for alleged, quote, false pretenses for gross misconduct. Oh, one more thing worth noting. The staff of the GTA forums did verify that information. Now, my crazy tinfoil hat theory, because we all know GTA got delayed for a whole year, maybe that's the reason? When he was asked about the new release date, he replied with, "I'm highly confident, and at the same time, there have been limited circumstances where more time was required to polish a title and make sure that it was spectacular, and that time has been well spent. When our competitors go to market before something was ready, bad things happened. That said, I'm highly confident on the new date. Ultimately, whatever the reason for the delay is, there are a lot of people who will not be happy with the delay being there in the first place. That's for sure." Moving on, Steam fumbled the bag because last month a horror game was not approved on the platform because of this image. Yep, Steam allows games about sex with historical figures, but God forbid we have a game that shows an adult woman in a swimsuit. The studio Aftermath Z Game tried to contact Valve support, but originally they didn't budge, even with the attention the original tweet got. And the studio wrote a long message about the situation, reminding them that games far worse than theirs exist on the platform, and they got a copy-paste response on how to report it. Oh boy. Since that basically got them nowhere, the studio asked for a different agent, and thankfully Steam gave them one. The studio even mentioned how the whole tone was different, and finally Steam decided to allow the game to stay the way it was. The studio wrote a thankful message to the community that kept talking about the situation, and the reward for their persistency is 1,000 wish lists in a singular night. Now, on to their whiny competition, because 72% of game developers say that Steam is effectively a PC gaming monopoly. Now, Steam got there with hard work and actually caring about gamers, and also, as with the story from earlier, they're not perfect. But if you actually paid attention around Steam, you would know that Gabe Newell actually plays games, so I don't know. You think he actually has an idea of what gamers want? Not to mention, unlike other CEOs, you can actually write the guy an email and he's gonna respond, given some time. Well, mostly respond. There are some cases where the guy doesn't for a while. But anyways, I'm getting distracted. These statistics come from a survey where 306 executives from large companies were asked if they agree or disagree that Steam has a monopoly on PC games. 72% slightly or strongly agreed that Steam has a monopoly over PC games, and on top of that, 88% said that at least 3/4 of their revenue come from Steam, while 37% reported that 90% of their revenue came from Steam. But here's the thing. Even PC Gamer, who is notorious for defending these companies, wrote an article about how hard Steam's competitors whiffed. Let that sink in. And if you don't think the competitors whiffed, let me remind you, what happened to the EA launcher? PC Gamer also reminded people of how Amazon tried to compete with Steam and failed hard. Like how we reported last week with New World going on maintenance mode. And well, don't get me started on the terrible Microsoft Store UI. Dear God, it feels like a terrible copy-paste of the Google Play Store. And that thing can't be used by normal people. On top of that, you look at game industry, you'll see 75% of respondents were senior managers or senior C-suite level executives with studios that have more than 50 employees, which this list basically includes the AAA studios and some that are trying to compete. And let's not even bring up the Ubisoft store. What was that thing in there in the first place? I mean, the only thing they sell there is their own games, assuming they're not NFTs. And the last time I used that was for Black Flag because it forced you to install it, not because I wanted to. Even if you buy the game on a different storefront, it forced you in their goddamn horrible launcher. Oh, brother. And let's not forget about Epic Games. I have a hate boner for them for what the company and all it's fucking doing. Especially the exclusivity deals they sign. Sure, they're good for the company, but holy shit, that's a prime example of a monopoly. Don't let the companies tell you otherwise. You don't see these people making surveys about how Epic is trying to create a monopoly now, do you? And let's not forget the fact that the damn thing didn't have a refund policy for the first year. Hell, all of my library on the Epic Store is exclusively shit that they gave away. That's how little I care for it. But enough of this, let's wrap this up before I blow a casket. And how? Well, with a good example, really. Battlefield 6 is currently ranked as the second lowest rated game of the series on Steam. Considering this is the type of information game companies tried forcing Valve to hide, I'm looking at you, Ubisoft. I'm not really surprised that they will call this a monopoly. Feel free to voice your opinion in the comment section if you believe otherwise. Moving on, our creators managed to sell 1.5 million copies in just 3 days. And at least with those copies sold, the Metacritic reviewers actually woke up and reviewed the damn game. On top of all of that, the studio founder is a health bar hater and said that it turns games into an Excel spreadsheet. And adding on, immersion is better than answers served on a silver plate. Now, I can make a joke about EVE Online here, considering Microsoft sponsored one of their events back in 2022. But anyways, let's continue with our creators. This came from an interview where the studio founder said, "Our game has physical properties and we are building really immersive three-dimensional worlds. We're asking players to lean in instead and really look at things. Everything is there. There are so many cues in the sound, in the VFX, in everything. So when you look at how bullets travel and it hits, it cascades, it has kinetics. Those are qualities that just go away. If you put a damage number on top or a health bar, that's redundant. Now, you're playing the Excel sheet of a game. I'm like, why are we building these fantastic 3D simulated worlds if we're not supposed to appreciate them?" And the guy's definitely on something, considering his game sold 1.5 million copies in 3 days. He said they just decided to ditch the health bar and trust the players to understand what's going on. Hard to believe that happened after seeing bug raids in Final Fantasy XIV, but impressive nonetheless. Hell, even the Palworld devs calling the game a new benchmark for Unreal Engine games should count for something. Probably because Studio Match cracked the code of Unreal Engine and used it to create a good game. Take notes, people! That's how you make an Unreal 5 game! And speaking of Final Fantasy, Square Enix finally replaced Kate Steiner, however we pronounce that, I'm not even gonna bother correcting myself, who approved of political violence. Not surprising since she was the lead localizer for Final Fantasy XIV's Dawntrail expansion. I guess another localizer fucked around and found out. Yay! That was an easy dub, but because we're talking about Square Enix, a huge L comes along. Because they're also aiming to have AI do 70% of its QA work by the end of 2027. This is part of their effort to create additional foundational stability, and to do all of the AI stuff, they partnered up with Matsuo Laboratory at the University of Tokyo to, quote, improve the efficiency of game development processed through AI technologies. The aim for the university and Square engineers is to automate 70% of the QA and debugging tasks in game development. Yep, wouldn't be surprised if the new games have a dip in quality, especially if they start laying off their QA teams. Now, is there another way for them to go about this? By, I don't know, giving the QA testers a way to use AI to automate the tedious tasks of QA? There most certainly is. Will Square go down that route? Well, we'll hear about it. Hell, according to IGN, Square Enix laid off over 100 workers overseas, and on top of that, a slide presentation that is now publicly available, mind you, offered the progress report on Square Enix ongoing, quote, reorganization of overseas organizations. Boy, that's a mouthful. Of which this restructuring seems to be a part of. And as per Square Enix, the strategy has already involved, quote, closing overseas development studios and shifting towards consolidating development functions in Japan. Now, if only they fired their ethics department, or I don't know, maybe replace it with AI, I think that's one more possible use of AI that people can agree that's ethical? I mean, let's be real. How much damage can an AI do compared to their ethics department? You tell me. Now, speaking of disasters in the making, Ubisoft's stock managed to plummet below €7, and it seems to be in a free fall because on Sunday, as of the recording of this video, it's currently sitting just above €6. It really isn't looking good for our old buddies here at Ubislop. Hell, their marketing cap fell below €1 billion and is currently sitting at just below €846 million. But don't worry guys, they stopped focusing on people who hate them and claim that Shadows won the battle against the Backlash. Because of them winning the fight against the Backlash, their stocks are going up! That is, if we flip the graphs upside down. As much as it will be fun taking the piss off of Ubisoft, they're more than capable of doing that themselves. The Ubisoft CEO attended Paris Game Week to give a discussion on technological upheavals, and before going into any of that, Guillemot analyzed the backlash against Assassin's Creed Shadows, then showed a video described as pretty corporate but also very dramatic, that explained how the company turned things around. Sure, buddy, sure. Stay in the land of the delusions a little longer. Maybe we have Ubisoft 2 next year. Well, I don't know, maybe behind the dumpsters, the nearest McDonald's. So that would be, well, roughly about a 15-minute walk, at least according to Google Maps. Anyways, in his presentation, translated by Game Files, Guillemot said that Ubisoft was initially surprised by the extent of the attack. We quickly realized that it was a battle with our fans, to demonstrate that we're, in fact, more of a video game than a message. Oh, brother. Yeah, I told you, I don't need to take the piss out of Ubisoft. They can do that themselves. Now, if we take a step back, or Guillemot takes a step back, because we can kind of see what's happening, you'll realize that it wasn't a battle, it was constructive criticism. I mean, how do you manage to fuck up a game that your community was waiting for since, I don't know, the inception of the franchise? I mean, if you did this properly, maybe you wouldn't have to make a new company and sell a portion of it off to Tencent, but you know, your credit score is going down, man. Get with the program. But anyways, then Guillemot played a 3-minute video, which frankly speaking, is just a word salad. With the last part of it being the most delusional thing I've seen so far. And to quote it, with our allies beside us, we found confidence again to stand tall, to take risks, to speak up, even against the loudest haters. And by the time Assassin's Creed Shadows launched, thanks to our fans, momentum was finally on our side. Sure, buddy, sure, you might have had some allies, but that momentum you're looking at is gravity, and we all know what gravity does. Especially with objects at a high altitude. I mean, let's be real here, the only thing on his side is chill journalists, and I'm using the term journalists here lightly. Like, well, the usual sort that will spread corporate butt cheeks and start licking out of there. Hell, even Game Files noted that the video attempted to paint a picture of confidence while not addressing any of the reasons why there was backlash. They didn't even bring up Star Wars Outlaws in the shit show that was. Fucking hell, man. How can't you climb a ladder and hold a gun at the same time? It's not exactly rocket science. And before anyone decides to defend Ubisoft, let me remind you, this is the company that made these quote-unquote gems. I rest my case. And speaking of delusions, whoever is running the X account for Xbox UK should probably stop and take a step back, because this is not how you address your critics. Now sure, there might be actual haters, but as Madame Savvy put it, maybe instead of wasting time, quote, replying to your haters, you can make a game that actually sells. And here's the thing, VG Insider estimates that the game sold just under 112,000 copies, which is still a good amount, but for a studio backed by Microsoft, these numbers are absolutely abysmal. And now, to top it all off, the Kingdom Come Deliverance lead says Obsidian should use Microsoft's fortune and make a game more like Kingdom Come Deliverance. I mean, they tried that with Avowed, but look at where that got them. But anyways, this whole thing came from a tweet where he talked about finishing The Outer Worlds 2, at least if I understood that correctly. He said, finished, 7 out of 10. But what I find sad is that the company and the people who gave us one of my favorite games ever, Fallout and New Vegas, have been unable, even after the 15 years and with all of Microsoft's money and latest technology advances, to come up with a new single game mechanic that could take this proven but ancient formula somewhere new. Can any of you think of a single new game mechanic in The Outer Worlds that wasn't already in Deus Ex or the original Fallout games more than 25 years ago? Unfortunately, I can't. Give me a living, simulated world through non-linearity. Give me something more than loot boxes, maintenance shafts, loading screens, and even grinding in a static scripted world. The man's got a point. Obsidian hasn't made anything good in the past 25 years, and frankly, I'm shocked they're still around. And now, let's return back to where we started. And what a great way to end the week, especially with some Nintendo news. Nintendo 2 Switch managed to sell 10 million units, quite impressive. However, the Wii U still outsold them by 3 million, and the 3DS by 65 million. Now, before anybody mentions, yeah, those two consoles have more time to sell, but I still find it amusing that the Switch 2 couldn't outsell the Wii U as of the 30th of September. And now on to the greatest news of the week. The head of the US Patent Office takes a step back in order to re-examine Nintendo's patent on, quote, summon subcharacter and let it fight patent. Oh boy, this is gonna be a doozy. Now, this is not gonna be shocking anyone, considering other companies did it first, with the Cosmic Soldier doing this, followed by the Megami Tensei series. Mind you, I'm not talking about modern entries here. I'm talking about games that were released as early as 1987 for the Famicom and the Super Famicom when it comes to Digital Devil Stories, and 1985 for the MSX and the PC-88 for Cosmic Soldier. These are the earliest games that I could find that have both the ability to summon a sub-character and let it fight for you. The same thing that Nintendo tries to patent. Do you catch my drift? Now, here's the reminder here, anytime I talk about legal stuff, I'm not a lawyer. So if you want a lawyer's opinion, I'd suggest checking out Legal Mindset. He already did a video on the subject at hand, and it's quite enlightening. But anyways, continuing on with the story. GameSpray reported that John A. Squire, the new director for the US Patent Office, has personally ordered a re-examination after he, quote, determined that substantial new questions of patentability have arisen. Squire also pointed out there are two older US patents applications, one filed by Konami in 2002, and the other one filed by Nintendo itself back in 2019 as, quote, prior art references. He also added both would be important in describing whenever the claims are patentable, and each, quote, raises a substantial new question for patentability. Now, if we can only make it so game companies can't patent mechanics, that would be great. And if we can also retroactively invalidate those patents, you know, like I can dream, right? It's not like I don't want the Nemesis system in other games. But anyway, I digress. This is a long time coming blow for Nintendo, and I can't wait to see what happens, considering last month we also reported that Japan's patent office rejected one of Nintendo's patents. Personally, I want Nintendo to lose and to stop suing smaller companies, as that doesn't help gamers. It only hinders game development. But that was all for this week. Again, if you liked the video, hit the like and subscribe buttons, share the video, and I'll see you next time.